My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
Ms Bowen.
My Lords, the UK Government is committed to supporting the sustainability of trusted journalism. We've announced plans to introduce a new code of conduct to govern the relationship between dominant online platforms and the different groups of users which depend on them, including news publishers. We are engaging with the Australian Government to develop our understanding of the progress they are making and are closely monitoring the reaction from both publishers and platforms.
Lord Bishop of Oxford.
I thank the Noble Baroness, the Minister, for her answer. Given the proportion of people who now receive most of all of their news through social media, does the government believe that public interest news publishers should have fair, reasonable and non-discriminatory access to strategically significant online platforms for news production and distribution? And given the actions of Facebook in recent days, how can that be secured in the United Kingdom for the future?
The Right Reverend Prelate makes an important point, and my Right Honourable friend, the Secretary of State, has been very clear about his concerns about the Australian news being removed by Facebook, and also it's been absolutely clear about the importance of authoritative news services, particularly during the pandemic, and the huge part that they have played. As I mentioned in my first answer, we are planning to create a digital markets unit which will ensure fair competition both for publishers and more widely for other sectors, and we remain committed that everyone should be able to access authoritative information easily and freely.
Lord Putnam.
Given the lack of transparency that typifies the working practices of these social media companies, would the Noble Baroness, the Minister, confirm that the government is working closely with its European neighbours and the new Biden administration in developing a robust international legislative approach sufficient to bring these vast and seemingly unaccountable empires within the legal supervision of sovereign nations? If so, could you possibly share with us the progress made to date?
I'm unable to share the detail of the progress made to date. I can reassure the Noble Lord that the government is using every opportunity to have international dialogue, both with our European neighbours, but also this morning my Right Honourable friend, the Secretary of State, met with his counterpart in Australia, and he recently also met with his counterpart in Canada. So we are working in the most collaborative way possible.
Lord Clement Jones.
My Lords, the Australian approach risks legislating in a way which will create its own unintended outcomes. Content and copyright for news publishers is just one part of the problem and can be solved. Market dominance in access to data and in digital advertising is a much bigger issue, and we've had many reports urging legislation and action: Cairncross, Furman, Digital Task Force, and now Penrose. My Lords, why is the government dragging its heels in bringing forward legislation to tackle it effectively?
Government is not dragging its heels, but as the Noble Lord explained very eloquently, there are a number of interlocking issues here which our new Digital Markets Unit will seek to address.
Lord Vasey of Didcot.
Can I congratulate the Lord Speaker on his declaration of independence and his remarkable ability to tweet from the Woolsack? My Lords, I refer to my entries in the Register of Members' Interests. There are 3 schemes in the UK that currently support local journalism: BBC, Facebook and Google. Would my honourable friend the Minister consider creating a forum for publishers and platforms, including, for example, Microsoft, to meet on a regular basis to try and coordinate these different activities, give proper, sustained financial support to local newspapers?
I'm very happy to take my noble friend's suggestion back to colleagues in the department, but I know that we are in regular discussion with all the groups that he mentioned.
I welcome the action of the Australian government in creating a mechanism to distribute the value of news media more fairly. And I hope that when we do similarly in the future, we're able to ensure that it benefits the entire news ecosystem, not only parts of it. But deeply worrying was the spectre of the Australian government revising its domestic legislation as a result of a series of phone calls with Mark Zuckerberg. Of course, we need to hear the views of all stakeholders, but given that Facebook are clearly using its monopoly power and is willing to resort to bullying tactics in order to revise domestic legislation of a sovereign state, does the noble lady, the Minister, agree with me that during the period in which we are working democratically on a number of regulatory fronts, including online safety bill, competition law, and malicious communication offences, that all interaction between Facebook and government should be on the record in committee hearings and other public arenas, so they cannot undermine the transparent democratic legislative process which we all pride ourselves on.
This government does believe that social media companies must be held to account for the consistent and transparent enforcement of their terms and conditions for those using their sites. That includes online safety, to which the noble lady referred, but also, of course, protecting people's freedom of speech. And we are establishing a regime both through the online safety bill and through the digital markets unit, which will do this in a transparent way.
Lord Bassam of Brighton.
My Lords, events in Australia highlight both the right and importance of governments acting to ensure online platforms recognise the value of reliable news content. Would the noble Baroness the Minister outline for the House the principles that will inform the government's approach to regulatory legislation set out in the upcoming online safety bill, and spell out what measures are being considered to outlaw online disinformation campaigns, fake news, and how this will be balanced with the need to protect free speech exemptions for journalists and writers?
Well, I fear I may be growled at by colleagues in the House if I answer the noble Lord's question in full, so I will write to him with more detail on the online safety bill, but as he is aware, it will focus on both user-generated content, platforms that allow user interaction, and search engines. More broadly, in relation to competition, the regime will lead to an enforceable code of conduct which will stimulate competition and innovation as part of its regime.
Lord McNally.
My Lords, the Minister has several times referred to the Digital Markets Unit of the CMA as one of the weapons that will be at our disposal. But the CMA has called for new statutory powers for that unit. Will she commit that on the online harms bill that has just been referred to, those statutory powers will be included as new powers for the Digital Markets Unit?
Well, I think the statutory powers for the Digital Markets Unit specifically relate to the Code of Conduct and how that will apply to platforms that have strategic market status. So I think those are, if I've understood the noble Lord's questions correctly, separate from the Online Harms Bill, but those powers will be put on a statutory basis.
Lord MP.
My Lords, there is a widespread feeling in the community that these large companies are so powerful that an individual country like our own won't be able to stand up to them. Could I refer back to Lord Putnam's contribution with regard to international cooperation to deal with them? And is that a properly coordinated process at the present moment? And can she also confirm, as most of these companies are American owned, has this issue arisen in any trade discussions with the United States of America?
The noble Lord is right that these are global companies, and it will require some coordination internationally to have maximum impact. We are very much working with partners, as I said, in response to Lord Putnam, but we also are aware that both other countries around the globe and the major platforms are looking at the work that we are doing, and we are leading in our ambition in this field.